All right, today we are diving into an absolutely critical moment from Matthew chapter 27. We're talking about the trial of Jesus before the Roman governor Pontius Pilate. And let me tell you, this is so much more than just a historical event. It's this incredible clash of power, of truth, and, as you'll see, of prophecy. The whole scene really boils down to this one huge question. We are about to watch a showdown, not just between two guys, but between two completely different kingdoms. One is all about earthly, political muscle, and the other, it's built on a spiritual truth that just won't bend. So let's jump right in. Matthew 27, verse 11. Jesus is dragged before Pilate, the man who literally holds the power of life and death in his hands. And Pilate, he wastes no time. He cuts right to the chase with the question that's on everyone's mind. Art thou the king of the Jews? Now, you have to understand, this accusation was a brilliant political move. See, the chief priests knew that a religious charge, something like blasphemy, would mean absolutely nothing to a practical Roman governor. So what did they do? They framed it politically. By accusing Jesus of calling himself a king, they were basically saying he was challenging Caesar's authority. And that's something Pilate had to take seriously. Jesus' answer, also right there in verse 11, is so simple but so deep. Thou sayest. Now, that's not a denial. It's a really clever way of saying yes. He's confirming his kingship, but at the same time, he's signaling that his kingdom isn't what Pilate's thinking of. It's not some earthly rebellion that's going to cause problems for Rome. And as we see in verses 12 and 13, this is when the chief priests and elders just let loose. They start throwing everything at him, a whole storm of accusations. Blasphemy, sedition, threatening the temple. They are just desperately trying to make something, anything stick in Pilate's mind. And then, in the middle of all that chaos, with all these life or death charges flying around, what do we get? We get this powerful, almost deafening silence. Jesus answered nothing. He just stood there. Can you imagine the tension in that room just skyrocketing? Verse 14 gives us Pilate's reaction. The governor marveled greatly. And of course he did. I mean, in his entire career, anyone on trial for their life would be begging, pleading, arguing, denying, doing anything they could. But Jesus' calm silence, that was something Pilate had probably never seen before. It was completely outside his understanding of how people act under that kind of pressure. And this is where it all clicks into place. This silence wasn't just some act of defiance. It was prophecy being fulfilled. Hundreds of years before this moment, the prophet Isaiah wrote that God's suffering servant would be oppressed and afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. The very people who prided themselves on knowing the scriptures were watching them happen right in front of their faces, and they were completely blind to it. So Pilate, he can sense that this whole thing is driven by jealousy, not justice, and he starts looking for a way out. Verse 15 tells us about this Passover custom, where the governor would release one prisoner back to the people. For Pilate, this must have seemed like the perfect political escape hatch. It was his chance to end this whole mess without condemning a man he was pretty sure was innocent. So Pilate gives the crowd a choice. On one side, you have Jesus, and on the other, you've got this guy who verse 16 calls a notable prisoner named Barabbas, a man who was a known insurrectionist, a murderer. But here's where the symbolism just gets unbelievably deep. The name Barabbas is Aramaic, Bar Abbas. It literally means son of the father. Just let that sink in for a second. Think about what that name means in this specific context. So here is the absolute heart of the matter. The choice the crowd was given wasn't just between a teacher and a murderer. No, on a much deeper spiritual level, they were being asked to choose between Barabbas, the false son of the father, and Jesus, the true son of the Father. It's a huge prophetic moment, and it's disguised as a simple political choice. So in verse 17, Pilate lays it out for the crowd, plain and simple. Whom will ye that I release unto you, Barabbas or Jesus, which is called Christ? He probably thought the choice was a no-brainer, right? A violent criminal versus a man who, at worst, seemed like a harmless spiritual guy. But you have to ask yourself, why did Pilate offer this choice in the first place, so sure of how it would turn out? Well, the last verse in our section today, verse 18, gives us this incredible peek into his mindset. It shows us that Pilate wasn't fooled by this religious drama for a single second. The verse says it as plainly as it gets, for he knew that for envy they had delivered him. Pilate, the Roman pagan, saw right through the whole charade. He knew this wasn't about justice or protecting their religion. It was about raw human envy. The chief priests were scared of losing their power and their influence to this incredibly popular teacher from Galilee. And that just leaves us with this massive question that echoes down through the centuries. We've seen that this whole trial was driven by envy, not by law. And it really makes you wonder, when justice gets all tangled up with our own powerful emotions, how on earth is the truth ever supposed to win?